What's up, guys? Pop by Pigs for Life here, and today we're back with another episode of Conservation Carnival in Planet Zoo. Man, it is super nice to finally be back into Planet Zoo. I have recently had so much motivation to want to play, and while I did enjoy my little Jurassic World Evolution 2 break, I am super stoked to finally be back in Conservation Carnival. So if you guys remember from last episode, I know it has been a while since we've done a Conservation Carnival episode. We did a little bit more work on the surrounding town by adding in several public buildings. So we added in fire station, police station, we expanded the town hall a little bit. We added in this amazing supermarket. We added in several gas stations, a bank. We added in a trailer park. We added in a school, public pool, post office. And yeah, so that's all we did last episode. We also did a little bit on the petting zoo. So we created this new dingo enclosure. And I mentioned this last episode, but the reason I decided to include the dingoes in the petting zoo is because recent studies show that the dingoes actually descended from domestic dogs brought over by indigenous Australians. We also made a new and improved emu enclosure. Ooh, look at the babies. Oh my gosh, so recently I've been watching quite a lot of videos about baby emus, and I really want to get a pet emu when I grow up. They just seem so adorable. I mean, obviously they're not as adorable in-game as they are in real life, but I really want to get a pet emu when I grow up. So, yeah, so we did that. We ended up getting rid of the quokkas and the wombats, and by get rid of, I mean we just released them all to the wild. So then we also made a new and improved enclosure for the maned wolves. To keep with the sort of South American theme, we've got jaguars, we've got Andean bears, and we've got maned wolves, even though this used to be for grizzly bears. And then we also built this amazing looking enclosure for the Fusa. These guys are absolutely stunning. I've never built for the Fusa before, but this is an animal I've wanted in the game since the very beginning. So I'm super happy that we got Fusas. So now, I did do a little bit of work off camera. So as you can see, I decided to add in this monorail station. I got a proper monorail station from the Steam Workshop. And I created the actual routes for the monorail. I decided to keep it in just this area, and I didn't expand it over here because I feel like you could get a pretty good view of the jaguars and the Andean bears and the maned wolves. But what we're eventually going to do is I'm probably going to create another boardwalk that goes along here so that we can get an even better view of the jaguars. What I will probably do, however, is right next to the African elephant and Hamadryas baboon enclosure, I will add in an enclosure for reticulated giraffe, Somali wild ass, dromedary camel, addax, and common ostrich, and it will go in there. And by it, I mean the monorail station. One other thing I added off camera is I added in this hospital, and so I placed it down and I worked a little bit on the interior. So we've got a little check-in area, we added a little cafeteria, we got some benches, we've got a couple of staff rooms right over here, and we've also made quite a bit of use of the veterinary hospitals. We put one down here, and then I also I added in this workshop as what's supposed to be a janitor's closet, and another staff room, and added 2 more vet hospitals, vet hospitals, which are supposed to be like the doctor's offices. I also added this little shelf for like sort of like a kid's waiting room, and I also made sure to use all of the cozy benches. So that's pretty much all I did in between this episode and last episode. Oh yeah, I did also add in a little bit of backyard stuff over here. So what we are gonna do this episode is, so to start, we're gonna do a little bit more when it comes to the surrounding area. So what I did is, at the end of last episode, I downloaded a Steam Workshop blueprint for a massive hotel. So that's gonna go right here. It is in German, I'm pretty sure. So I will change the language to be English. That's gonna go right here. What's great is I don't think I need to do any of the floors because the windows are tinted, but I will at the very least work on the lobby. I'll decorate that. Right over here, I think I want to add in a smaller version of the neighborhood that we had over here. So maybe I'll do like a little cul-de-sac, add a couple more backyards. I will also add a couple houses over here. But anyways, so I thought about this a little bit more. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make a couple of changes to the wildlife rehab. Previously, I have had the pronghorn antelopes and the black-tailed prairie dogs together. If we take a look at the pronghorn antelopes, they actually don't have any interspecies bonus with the black-tailed prairie dogs. So what I think I'm going to do is, since the pronghorn antelope is a native Texas animal, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to give the pronghorn antelopes this section. The black-tailed prairie dogs are going to stay in this section, and I'm instead going to move the striped skunks into this section with the black-tailed prairie dogs. And then I might also do a little bit more work on the beaver/raccoon enclosure, because they're going to still go in here. So then later on down the line, if we have time, I think we will do, like 1 or 2 enclosures for the carnival area, and those will likely be for the grizzly bears and the timber wolves. So yeah, so we have got quite a lot to do in this episode. I will make sure to break it up just a little bit. It will mostly be time-lapse, but I will break it up a tiny bit with some real-time recording. So yeah, with that all out of the way, let's get right into it. Alright guys, so first thing we end up doing in this time-lapse is making those adjustments to the black-tailed prairie dog enclosure. So as you can see, I started off by boxing all of the pronghorn antelopes and sending them to the trade center, and then I had to get rid of all of the habitat items that were of no use to the prairie dogs. So one thing you'll also notice is that I had to get rid of the walkthrough part for the guests, because the striped skunk cannot have a walkthrough enclosure, because guests will just flee from it. So one thing you'll see that I do is I decided to keep the walkthrough habitat for the pronghorn antelope. You will see that once we work on the pronghorn antelope enclosure. As you can see, I am adding in some more tall grasses, some rocks, a couple more burrows, and now we are moving on to the raccoon and beaver enclosure. So after going back to it, I decided that the enclosure was a little bit of a jumbled mess. So because of that, what I decided to do is I went onto the Steam Workshop a while ago, and I downloaded some beaver lodges, and so now you can see that I am adding a couple of those beaver lodges around the enclosure to make it a little bit more neat. Because of that, I did have to rearrange a couple of the enrichment items. And as you can see, what I am doing is for the raccoons, I decided to add in a couple of the chicken coops that we got in the Barnyard Animal Pack, because the raccoons, among many other animals, can actually use those as hard shelter. And so I decided to make the water a little bit more deeper for the beavers, because they like to have a little bit of deep water. And also I did have to add quite a lot of beaver lodges, and so that beaver lodge that I just placed did obstruct some of the food enrichment for the keepers. So because of that, I decided to move it elsewhere, and eventually I did decide to move the beaver pond in that area. You'll see that in just a second. I decided that the lake was a little bit too deep, so because of that, I made it a little bit shallower. And so now you can see moving the rest of those habitat items, and then we are moving swiftly along to the pronghorn antelope enclosure, but not before adding one final beaver lodge. So pretty much this habitat in and of itself was all set. I didn't really need to make too many changes. I did also put the striped skunks in with the black-tailed prairie dogs, and then for the pronghorn enclosure, I just had to move and rearrange and add a little bit more enrichment. And then here you can see I am adding the path for the guests to walk through the enclosure. And so then from here, there were these little gaps in between the path that I decided to fill with some desert foliage. And one thing I decided to do for the black-tailed prairie dogs and the striped skunks is I decided to add in a couple of viewing domes. And I added a viewing dome entrance that I disguised with one of the New World staff buildings. So after I add these last few finishing touches, we are now ready to move on to adding the massive hotel. So like I had mentioned previously, we're not doing every single individual floor of the hotel because all of the windows are tinted and you can't see inside. However, we are decorating the lobby. So I first went ahead and added some path all throughout the lobby. This was so that way I could map out exactly where the guests were going to be able to go. And then in a second, you'll see that I downloaded this elevator shaft piece from the Steam Workshop. So much like I've done with all of my Steam Workshop blueprints, I will make sure to link them down in the description as to give credit to all of the talented people who are much better at Planet Zoo builds than I am. So, as you can see, I'm just expanding that wall. I decided to add in a little bit of a door, so that way, we could pretend that there is a staircase, also behind that little wall. And so now you just saw that I added in the front desk, and you'll see that much like I did with the hospital, I decided to use some plaster pieces as more of a counter. So yeah, you can see that I'm doing that now. And so one thing I really wanted to go for with this is I wanted to go for one of those hotels that offer free breakfast, because I've been to a couple of those hotels and they are absolutely amazing. So now you can see I'm adding some staff buildings. So I added in a staff quarters. I added in 2 workshops, which are meant to act as sort of janitor closets, and then I added in a research center that's supposed to sort of act as a place where staff would go to, like, wash the bed sheets, the pillowcases, stuff like that. So now you can see what I just did is I used some of the Australian wall decorations And you'll see that I'm using a lot of the prefabs to decorate the lobby, such as this Australian piece with the Southern Cassowary statue. You can see I'm also adding in a load of comfy benches. Now you can see I'm adding in some of those shops, so I decided to add in a Missy Good, a Street Fox Coffee, Bernie's Bakes, a bunch of other food and drink shops, and I also, on the opposite side, added in a couple of counters, and then in the middle of that floor, I just added in some of the aquatic tables, because they look a little bit more modern. So that kind of fits the aesthetic of the hotel. And so one thing that you'll see that I do is, much like I did with the front desk, I once again added in that plaster countertop, so that way it would look a little bit more realistic. So that's pretty much it for the interior of the hotel. Thinking about it, I probably could have added a little bit more wall decorations, especially behind the food counters. But now you could see that what I am doing is I am adding the ceiling, so that way we can have that illusion that there are actually hotel rooms above us, and that it's not just an empty ceiling. And of course I did need to fill in those gaps in the wall, because the walls weren't high enough. And so pretty much after that, we are going to work on the parking lot. So originally I decided to do a 4x4 grid, but then I realized that that was going to take way too long. So because of that, I decided to have an extension of path that was 8 meters long, and then I was able to create an 8x8 grid, and that got the parking lot done much faster. So all we have to do now is, really quickly, I had to get rid of the curbs that were sticking over the wooden floor in the interior of the hotel. And then after this, what I ended up doing is, I ended up having a path that sort of wrapped around one of the sides of the hotel, so that way, realistically, we could have, like, big, cargo trucks coming by to drop off any, like, food and other supplies and what have you, as well as, like, the dumpsters. You know what, honestly, thinking about it, I might download a, dumpster blueprint to put back there to make it look a little bit more realistic. And then because the path was connecting through the walls, I did have to put some guest barriers inside the walls. And so now pretty much the only thing we have left to do is add in the parking stalls, which I was able to get from the grocery store that we added in the last episode. So yeah, so with that being said, that's pretty much it for the hotel. All that we really have left to do is add in some of the desert foliage. So after this, we are going to move on to something that I did not really anticipate to do. So when I made the water deeper for the beaver pond, I decided to turn back on the animal space requirements, and as a result, I realized that the enclosure for the hippos was way too small. So what you can see me doing now is I decided that since the African elephants realistically could not go into the stadium because the entrance is way too small, I decided that the elephants and Hamadryas baboons were going to get a new enclosure, which we will work on in a future episode, and I was going to expand the hippo enclosure. So one thing you'll also see is that I decided to expand the southern white rhino and Nyala enclosure, and eventually I did have to make a couple of modifications to that big lake, so that way the southern white rhinos can actually go to that other side, because I guess rhinos are not very good swimmers, as they were not able to cross that big body of water. So now what you can see that I am doing is I am sort of starting a perimeter fence, or perimeter wall, I should say, to the carnival, and now we are adding in a couple more street houses in order to fill some of those gaps. So once again, I did want to add quite a bit of variety to the street houses. And so one thing you'll see is that I am able to sort of add in a couple of driveways in between some of the smaller houses, and then I eventually went ahead and added a couple of backyards using the bright green grassy fence that we got in the conservation pack, as well as adding in a couple of the backyard items that you saw previously in the backyard near the drive-thru safari. So for instance, I added in one of those pool enrichments, I added in a sprinkler, I added in a couple of beach balls, as well as adding in a couple of the playground items from the school, such as a swing set, a slide, so on and so forth. So then, other than that, all that's really left to do in this time lapse is to just add in some more of that desert foliage. Really quickly, I do want to apologize for the recent lack of videos. If you guys have seen my latest post, I did in fact have the flu a couple of weeks ago, and let me tell you, I was out of it. I did not have the energy to do anything, let alone record a video, and my voice was not in ideal conditions to do a whole lot of recording. Not to mention, I did also miss a lot of schoolwork from being sick, so because of that, I have had quite a bit of makeup work that I've needed to catch up on, and all in all, I do sincerely apologize for my lack of uploads, and I really quickly want to thank all of you who have been incredibly patient and supportive during my lack of uploading videos. So yeah, so as we are wrapping up this first time lapse, one last thing I wanted to mention is that this year we are trying to reach 175 subscribers before the end of 2025. So if you're enjoying this video so far, then please make sure to leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel to see some more videos just like this one. Not only will it help us reach our goal for this year, but it'll also help the YouTube algorithm recommend more videos that you might find interesting. And as always, by taking the time out of your day to click on this video and watch it, you are showing me a tremendous amount of support. So as always, thank you all so much for watching today's video. Alrighty guys, I have to say, this hotel is an absolutely phenomenal addition to the area. Like, originally I was just gonna put some more townhouses and just fill it all up with foliage, but this is 10 times better than anything else that I would have put here. One little thing that I did do is I did add some corresponding signs to the food counters, and already it looks so much better, like so much more lively. But like in general, this entire hotel is just such a good addition to the area, especially because of the whole tourism factor. Like, you've got like all of these attractions, but then you've got this hotel that you can stay at. Just looks super good. I am incredibly impressed. On top of that, all of these townhouses look super duper nice. I especially love the backyards that we have for some of them, and like the touches with the playgrounds and the pool and this little garden that we have over here. right over here, a little bit of a smaller one. Again, just looks so good. And then just wanted to add in one more little restaurant. And yeah, this just looks absolutely phenomenal. Great way to fill in the gaps, both with this stretch of townhouses as well as the hotel. So then one thing you'll notice is that I didn't quite get to the neighborhood bit. I think that I'm gonna do that next episode just as a way of breaking it up a little bit more. And then right over here with the sort of wildlife rehab, like this all just looks so much better than it did. Like we've got the area over here for the beavers. These guys are just loving it, along with the raccoons. This place just looks so much more organized than it did beforehand. Not to mention the pronghorn antelope enclosure. They seem to be loving it right over here. And then we've got the prairie dog and striped skunk enclosure. And really quickly, one thing I need to do is I need to add in a certain sign. Behold, Ountopia. And of course, one thing we also did was we made a couple of changes to the carnival. And I've actually recently had a couple of ideas to make a much better elephant and Hamadryas baboon enclosure. So I am really excited for the potential of Conservation Carnival. So now really quickly, while we do have a little bit more time left for this video, I do want to add in a couple of new enclosures to the carnival area. So like I'd mentioned, we are going to be adding in the Timberwolf as well as the Grizzly Bear. And what is going to happen is we're going to have a path going this way. There's going to be a boardwalk for guests to look into the Andean bear and the jaguar enclosure. And then right over here is going to be one of these circus tents. And on either side is going to be an enclosure for the grizzly bear and the Timberwolf. So, without further talking, let's get right into it. Alright guys, so as we are getting into the second and final time-lapse of the video, one thing I decided on doing was I decided to add in one more habitat, and that was the habitat for the Common Warthog and the Thomson's Gazelle. So as you can see, what I'm doing is I'm sort of adding the boardwalk that I had mentioned for the jaguars and the spectacled bears, so that way guests will be able to get a bit of an extra view. And so one thing I also decided to do is in that little space in between the boardwalk and the main path, I decided that that would have been a perfect spot to add some of the tents that we got in the Zookeeper Animal Pack. One thing that you could probably tell from my voice is that while I am feeling much better after having the flu, I'm still not exactly at 100%. So eventually, as I'm recording this, my voice might get a little bit raspy, so just bear with me, if you pardon the pun. So what you can see I am doing right now is I decided to move one of the ramps going onto the boardwalk, and I moved it right next to the tent, so that way what we would end up doing is we are going to put the Thomson's Gazelle and Common Warthog enclosure right next to the Fusa enclosure in that little open space. So now we are getting into adding the Timberwolf and Grizzly Bear enclosure. So one thing you can see that I am going to do with not only this set of enclosures but also with the lions and hyenas is basically I'm going to have one circus tent, and then on either side is going to be an enclosure for each one of those animals. So one thing I knew was going to happen if I decided to add in a third habitat in this time lapse is that the video was going to be quite a bit longer than I had intended. So it wasn't too much longer than it was originally, but basically I do really want to try and finish up Conservation Carnival because, believe it or not, we have been working on the zoo for almost 2 years. I believe that the 2-year anniversary of episode 1 of Conservation Carnival is fast approaching, and so while we aren't going to be finishing the zoo anytime soon, because I do have some other plans for the channel, so stay tuned for that, I definitely want to make it an effort to try and finish Conservation Carnival by the end of 2025. Okay, so with all that out of the way, I do have a couple of animal facts for you guys, so I'm going to once again go in the order of each animal that we add. So starting with the timber wolves. So, timber wolves, also commonly known as gray wolves, are one of the most widespread land mammals in the world, spanning across North America, Europe, and Asia. While populations across these areas are very stable, some of their subspecies, such as the Mexican gray wolf, are unfortunately endangered. Thankfully, there are many programs to help with the conservation of this subspecies. I know for a fact that they have a bachelor group of Mexican gray wolves at the Stone Zoo, which is my local zoo. There's also a common misconception that there is one alpha wolf in each pack. Instead, each family unit is led by both an alpha male and an alpha female, which are monogamously paired. So that means that they mate for life. And so I've mentioned this in a previous video, but most, if not all, members of the pack are actually offspring of the alpha male and alpha female, meaning that they are directly related. So now we are going to move on to some grizzly bear facts. So a couple episodes ago, I talked about the insane eating habits of grizzly bears, especially prior to hibernation. Despite this, grizzly bears are actually very good runners, being able to reach speeds of up to 30 miles per hour. Grizzly bears are able to reach these speeds in part due to the hump right above its shoulder. That hump is made of one giant muscle, and this gives them exceptional strength in their forelimbs, allowing them to dig for bugs, catch fish, and attack large game. Speaking of food, grizzly bears have massive claws that can reach up to 4 inches in length. This, combined with that powerful muscle that we just talked about, allows for grizzly bears to find food with relative ease. So that's it for the animal facts near the tent. I'm just finishing up the timber wolf enclosure, and now we are on to the grizzly bear enclosure. And so while we're doing that, I'm going to share some facts about the Thomson's Gazelle. So, the Thomson's Gazelle is the national animal of both Malawi and Eswatini. They are known for inhabiting the Serengeti region of East Africa, where they live alongside many larger herbivores such as plains zebras and blue wildebeest. Thomson's gazelles will often follow these larger herbivores around because as the larger herbivores eat the taller, tougher grass, they expose the softer, shorter grass, which is perfect for the gazelles to consume. One other cool fact is that the Thomson's gazelle is the 5th fastest land animal on Earth, reaching nearly 55 miles per hour or 90 kilometers per hour. They're able to use a combination of speed as well as running in a zigzag pattern to outmaneuver predators such as cheetahs, lions, hyenas, painted dogs, and leopards. And now for our final animal, we have the common warthog. So one cool fact about common warthogs is that they actually sleep in abandoned aardvark burrows. They use these burrows to rear their young and evade predators. And so when a warthog is run away from a predator, the mother will allow her offspring to flee into the burrow first, and she will often back up into the burrow so that she can still face any danger that may try to enter the burrow.
At times, 2 or 3 females with their offspring will also team up to nurture each other's offspring, sort of like a co-parenting situation. And so on the topic of aardvark burrows, there are actually a bunch of different animals that will use aardvark burrows that have been abandoned, and a lot of which you might not be expecting. So that's one thing that we will talk about in the next episode of Conservation Carnival, because one of the animals that we add next episode will be the aardvarks. So here you can see that I am adding some picnic benches in that little tent area, and now we are working on the Thomson's Gazelle and Common Warthog enclosure. So one thing I wanted to go for this enclosure is I wanted it to make this enclosure a little bit more simplistic. So one thing you'll see in a little while is that when it comes to adding plants and enrichment, I tried to keep it a little bit at a minimum. So one thing you can also see that I did is I made the fence a little bit shorter, and I once again used the elephant grass trick. And what's great is that this time we can actually have the elephant grass because, you know, it's a plant that's found in Africa. These animals are found in Africa. And so one thing you can also see is that I used a bunch of the groups that I had made for some of the other African habitats. And we're just reusing a bunch of different elements from some of the previous enclosures. And so now we're just adding in some enrichment for both species. And with that being said, that is the habitat finished, and with that, we are now going to end this time lapse.
Alright guys, I must say, I am loving the way that the carnival is coming together so far. Like, at first I didn't really know exactly what I was gonna do, but this looks absolutely phenomenal. Like, I especially love the use of this area over here with the zookeeper animal pack tents. We got another bounce house. We've got one of these like prop animal cages. I need to pause this because this is very laggy. The boardwalk should provide a very nice view of the animals. I do also really love this smaller enclosure. Again, such an amazing use of space. I will admit, it is starting to get a tad bit crowded in here, so we'll probably have to keep offspring to a minimum over here. On top of that, I really love the way that the Timberwolf and Grizzly Bear habitats look. We've got this nice big pond for the Grizzly Bears. We've got plenty of foliage for both the Timberwolves and the, the Grizzly Bears. I also really do love the terrain work I did for the Timberwolves. Gives the habitat a lot more character. Also, I even love with this circus tent. It looks fantastic. What I might even do is I might add in one of these gates. So that way, what we could do is we can, hypothetically speaking, have the animals go down this corridor and into the circus tent. So yeah, I think that that is a great place to end today's video. We got a whole heck of a lot done. We started by making some improvements to the surrounding area, by adding this massive hotel with a very nice looking lobby. We also added in a bunch more townhouses to this area over here. Not to mention, we also made several improvements to other existing areas of the zoo. So, for instance, we made this new and improved enclosure for prairie dogs and striped skunks, aptly named Ouncetopia. We created a new and improved enclosure for the pronghorn antelope, as well as some much needed improvements for the beaver and raccoon enclosure. On top of that, we did have to adjust the hippo enclosure because it was way too small, and so because that we did have to remove the elephant and hamadryas baboons. However, I did recently find quite a lot of inspiration for a new and improved hamadryas baboon and elephant enclosure, so that will have to be in a future episode. So, speaking of future episodes, next episode, here's what we're gonna do. So, like I said, we are fast approaching the 2-year anniversary of Conservation Carnival, so I want to get this thing done. So, what we're gonna do is we probably only need 2 more building episodes. So, what I think the plan is going to be is next episode, part of it is going to be adding the little neighborhood that I said I was going to do this episode. However, I wasn't really feeling too motivated to work on it, so because that, we'll do that next episode. And so what we're going to do is we're going to sort of make a mini, more exotic version of the petting zoo. So what it's going to be is we're going to have 3 walkthrough enclosures. One will be a new enclosure for the springbok, the aardvarks, and the meerkats. We will do one for both the kirkstickdick and the African spurred tortoise. And then we will do one for all 4 species of lemurs. The black and white ruffed lemurs, the cockerel shafaka, the red ruffed lemurs, and the ring-tailed lemurs. So yeah, with that being said, that is going to wrap up today's video. Really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If so, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to see some more Planet Zoo and Jurassic World Evolution 2 content. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.